Hey, what's up? Dave with Brazos Valley Strength, and welcome to the new YouTube studio. And I'm back to making coaching videos. I'm planning on probably one or two a month as time allows for right now. I do have some good videos planned. This video, I think, is a smaller topic, but an interesting topic that I think will lead into a lot of the other videos that I do have planned on deadlift positions and things like that. So hopefully this video will be able to be concise enough, but still add a lot of value to those ones that are coming. So today we're going to talk about grip width on deadlifts, and particularly kind of questions around gripping the smooth part of the bar inside of the knurl. I've been seeing this question a lot on Instagram with other powerlifters, kind of their questions and answers that they post on their stories. And I've been getting this question a good bit from a lot of my clients and how they grip width is going to affect the deadlift and if it's something that they should try. So we're really going to be framing this concept around the sumo deadlift, mostly because we just don't have a lot of the same options with conventional. I'm going to use conventional a little bit later to frame a little bit of this overall. But with the conventional deadlift, we just don't have the option of going very, very close. But some of the concepts here as far as the grip width and how it affects the upper back will definitely show up with the conventional. So it's not going to be totally ignored, but this definitely is very, very sumo biased. So to frame things here, I think we're probably starting to see a little bit of a resurgence. I think actually a while back when a few years ago, people like Chance Mitchell and the low hand grip in the deadlift, very much fingertip grip stuff was being more popularized. I think some of these things, like gripping the bar pretty close, was fairly popular. And then, I don't know, I didn't see it for a while, but definitely right now, some of these very, very good, younger, even like kind of smaller weight class deadlifters are using a very close grip in the deadlift. And I think it has a lot of value to be had here. And so I wanted to look at why, and actually beyond just the grip itself, how it can translate to other parts of the technique and optimizing your form in the sumo deadlift. So a good example would be somebody like Joe Bornstein, very good lifter that grips on the smooth part of the bar. And one of the things that we can see besides the hook grip, and I'll talk about that, but the bar does get a noticeable amount of flex. And I think that this is a good topic to look at, that some of the potential benefits of gripping the bar closer is that I do think that we may be able to get a little bit more flex in the barbell itself. I talked about this in my my deadlift bar video, that I thought that deadlift bars were kind of silly, overall, but that one of the things that really stands out with a deadlift bar is that I think that sumo deadlifters get a big advantage over conventional deadlifters because of this concept right here, that gripping the bar closer and making that bar bend more by putting that point right in the middle of the barbell, I think does have a pretty big effect. So if somebody's deadlifting conventional versus sumo, that effect's going to for sure be magnified with load, total weight on the bar, having it bend more. But that point being more and more to the middle, I think does make a pretty big difference. With a power bar, it may not be quite so much. So with a bigger conventional deadlifter, the bar is still going to bend. I don't think that effect is quite as profound, but it is for sure something that's worth acknowledging here, especially when we're trying to optimize the position. The big thing, though, that gripping the bar closer will do is it's going to put your upper back, and when I say upper back or arms, I'm really going to be talking about your shoulder blades. If I'm talking about protraction and retraction, I'm talking relative to neutral. I may use terms like protract your arms or shoulders or whatever, but it's shoulder blades, but trying to visualize it in a simple way. So gripping the bar closer together will protract your shoulder blades more. As my hands come closer together, my scapula has to wrap around my upper body and actually lengthen the upper back. That's probably a pretty good thing conceptually for most people. So we can either start with a neutral position and have that, nice long arm position. But as I go closer, I may be kind of forcing a little bit more of that upper back stuff. I do think that there are some trade-offs with that especially people who struggle to maintain that position, maintain relative extension in their upper back, or a position that's viable for them to actually deadlift without getting too much rounding. If we go closer and we're really biasing towards that protracted position, I think it very much can lead into flexion in the upper body that may make it very difficult to lock out. And so that's an important thing to look at, is that protraction doesn't necessarily mean flexion, that we can have long protracted arms without actually having a lot of flexion in our upper backs. But they do kind of go together, and some flexion in the upper body can absolutely be beneficial here as well. And that can be a point where people can really emphasize this, especially somebody who's really good at extension. If somebody can get into a really good position and doesn't have any trouble maintaining a neutral position with their upper body, biasing their arms closer together can really help lengthen things and help allow the hips to get into a better position as well, and really create some advantages overall. Now, the opposite is true too, and I think that this is really where some of the wider grips, they're not quite as popular, especially among very good deadlifters. And I think that there's absolutely selection bias within this. That very good deadlifters are going to have good leverages that allow them to get into a good position, be relatively upright without having to round their backs a whole lot. And so maximizing some of these things, the closer grip and even some of the protraction and maybe some rounding in the upper back, those things are very much biased towards that population, myself included, that can get into that very good position. But a wider grip can really help people stay out of too much rounding and hopefully help maintain a little bit more extension in the upper back. One of the ways that I actually can demonstrate this is with something like a snatch grip RDL. This is something that I really like in my deadlift training. And one of the big reasons that I like it is not the reduction in range of motion. I especially with my long arms, I don't really feel like there's a huge difference overall with my range of motion between my regular RDL and a much wider snatch grip RDL. But what I feel a lot is with the snatch grip RDL, having that wider grip, it's very hard for my upper back, even if I'm letting it, even kind of relaxing my upper body. It's very hard to get my upper body to round more than I'm comfortable with. Just that wider position doesn't allow the scapula to wrap around the body quite as much, and it's much easier to maintain that position. So for people who struggle to maintain extension in their upper body, going a little bit wider can very much help maintain that upper body position. Now, I think some of the misconceptions here, I think sometimes errors, when we're analyzing this, may come around the lockout. And people oftentimes are blaming their hands pulling across their thighs and really struggling with lockout there. And like to some degree, that's true. But I think much more often that's with much thicker lifters, heavy men or women, whoever, but really struggling to get across their thighs just because the mass of their body is so big. But on an average kind of population level, I don't think that is the issue for most people, if they're kind of in ordinary terms as far as body weight. But if they're feeling like they're stuck around their thighs, it's that general upper back rounding. Now, I have a video planned on what I'll call the low lockout, and I think that there's ways that we can get around the lockout with the closer and wider grip. But generally speaking, a better position off the floor, better being able to maintain your posture kind of close to your original starting position and relatively neutral with your upper back, will make that lockout a whole lot easier. So if you're very much rounded through the middle of the lift, the lockout is always going to be very challenging. And so I could make the argument that we go a little bit closer, you may get into a better position. That's much more biased towards people who anatomically can make that happen in the first place. But shorter arms, stockier lifters, sometimes that slightly wider grip can really help maintain a little bit better posture, and then that may make the lockout a good bit easier. Now, within this concept, I did mention hook grip earlier. And I think one of the things to look at is actually the balance between the grip. Hook grip is going to accomplish that anyway. But I think that the concept is important because with hook grip, obviously we're gripping the same position with both hands, right? Kind of the first two fingers or so and the thumb are kind of the primary grip there. With mixed grip, that's still the case, but I don't think that people always think about it that way. And I've talked about this in my grip videos and my fingertip grip videos, but I really want to emphasize those first fingers in when I'm setting my grip. So you can see in some of these videos that if I line up my whole hand, like if I were to put my pinky at the start of the knurl with my underhand and then my overhand, my index finger at the start of the knurl, that's not the exact same grip to me. It actually is going to be wider with my underhand. And actually, I think the videos, I was a little surprised when I saw the videos, do a pretty good job of demonstrating that my underhand comes off the ground earlier because that grip is wider in my mind. So when we're setting our grip, whether we're using a close grip, kind of gripping more on the smooth part of the bar, or we're going a little bit wider, I think it's important for us to make sure that we're lining up those first two fingers more than anything else. So if I'm gripping the barbell, I tend to have my index finger on my overhand on the smooth part of the bar. That's just kind of a good balanced position to me. And on my underhand, I have more fingers off of it. I have two, maybe 2.5 fingers on the smooth part of the bar. So to me, that ends up lining up my grip evenly. And I think that's a big part of where people get some of the weird rotation with their grip, or the barbell in general. Sometimes I think the blame from mixed grip gets landed on the under overhand, which it can for sure be the case. But if the grip is not lined up appropriately and we're lining up more full hand, I think that makes grip a whole lot more off balance as well. From my experience, this ends up being more impacted with conventional. I think a lot of it is having to move around our bodies in the first place, having to get our arms and all of that out of the way, because especially, as I've gotten bigger, I've had a little bit more trouble with that. But I've had a lot more issues kind of finding when I do conventional, doing it mixed grip, I've had a lot more issues trying to find where my underhand needs to be because it's not exactly the same position. And so for me, I've certainly found that either working my underhand in a little bit closer than kind of feels natural, or making my overhand slightly wider ends up making that grip feel a lot more neutral relative to the other grip. So I think that that's a big part of this as well, is just finding that good balanced position and thinking about your first two fingers rather than your whole hand as far as grip. And I think that that can take away a lot of the windmill stuff. Now, the big question here too is about the grip itself, that if we're gripping closer on the barbell, are we going to be able to hold that position? Are we actually going to be able to hold the barbell and not have issues with it? My experience has actually been really positive with that. Now, I'm not gripping all the way on the smooth part of the bar. I think that actually for some people can work pretty well. I think surprisingly well. But I tend to like to have a few fingers on the knurl. Sometimes I'm gripping closer. Sometimes I have 2 fingers on the smooth, sometimes not. But I've actually found that just that little bit of texture on we'll call it the outside of my hand, but that little bit of texture actually does add enough grip for me to be able to feel like I'm secure with my grip. But another big part of this is that I've definitely found that gripping the smooth part of the bar, having at least 1 finger on the smooth part of the bar, lets me have the bar settle deeper in my hand. And that's actually one of the biggest deals to me. Like, I don't know that I care too much about bringing my arms a little bit closer or get a little bit more protraction. It's not a tremendous amount to me, but having the bar be smooth enough to not kind of catch earlier or higher in my hand when I'm setting my grip actually really helps me get it into a low point like I really want it to. And when I've gone wider, if I put, very similar grip, just go a finger wider, full hand on the knurl, I really struggle to let the bar hang, which is kind of counterintuitive because you would think that the more grip that I have, kind of the less that I have to do with my grip. But I found it to be totally the opposite, that having a little bit more on the smooth lets it settle deeper just because the bar isn't kind of catching because of that knurl. So, long story short, I do think that gripping the bar closer for many people, especially if you're a little bit of a smaller lifter, if you're a sumo deadlifter, obviously number 1, and if you're a smaller lifter, you're probably going to have a really good time gripping the bar closer. Just relative frame size, gripping the bar closer is not going to be as dramatic. For some people, if you're a bigger lifter, you may have a lot more trouble. That going in closer may have to navigate more of your body. You also, bigger lifters tend to struggle to get into that optimal sumo position anyway. And so at that point, gripping slightly wider may just naturally help maintain that back position overall. So like I said, I do have some other videos that will kind of feed off this video when we're talking about optimizing the sumo deadlift, but hopefully this is a good place to start for things and helps you understand what advantages there are from potentially gripping the bar closer for some people and maybe wider for others. So if you did like this video, give me a thumbs up. Let me know about the new studio if you like it in here. But if you haven't subscribe to the channel, do that, and we'll see you next time.